Teachers of Reddit. What is a teacher-parent meeting that will haunt you for life? Story 1. When I was in preschool, I told my teacher a story about how a boyfriend beat up his girlfriend, and she was crying, but then the police came and rescued her, and now she's safe and the boyfriend went to jail. My teacher called my mother in, explained that her classroom was a safe place, and asked if everything was okay at home. And that's the story of how my grandmother got in hot water with my mom for watching a cops marathon with me. Story 2. When I was 14, a teacher told us a story about a girl failing with 49 at the end of TE year. The mother of the girl then came to school with an envelope with $500 to let her daughter pass. The teacher took the money, but let the girl fail, and since it was off the record, the mother wasn't able to get the money back. Was my favorite teacher ever. Edit. A lot of you guys don't believe me. You're bad, I know it happened. Story 3. I'll never forget how one mother demanded that I give her daughter an A because giving her a B will ruin her chances of getting to a top-tier college. She told me that I have no compassion and consideration for her future. Her daughter barely participated in class, and honestly, she was not the brightest bulb in the room. I still cringe every time I remember her sense of entitlement. Edit. For those of you asking why she still got a B despite her meager class participation, my supervisor asked all of us in our subject area to change our passing grade from 75 to 60. The girl had a C initially. I don't know how many teachers are willing to admit to this adjustment demand from supervisors and principals. The school needed to keep some good grades for themselves for the evaluation committee. They often tell us that the students and parents are our clients, and we must try to keep them satisfied. The things money could buy. This is one of the reasons I left the school system. As you can see, this made me more aggrieved because I know that the grades were already adjusted. Yet this mother still had the gall to berate me for not having compassion. Story 4. My first parent-teacher night was terrifying. Mom and dad walk in looking like they couldn't give about being there. I got my happy face on and tried telling them about what's been going on in the classroom. Finally, I finished my spiel and dad says, "So what's this about you calling my daughter tight pants?" I'm freaking out, flipping through my mind about what he could possibly be talking about. Last thing I want to be considered is a pervert as a male teacher at an elementary school. Then it hit me. On the first day of school, the class was sitting on the floor crisscross, and her jeans were literally so tight she couldn't cross her legs on the floor. She looked like a weeble wobble trying to sit down. The class laughed, and she was cool with it. All I said was, "Okay, tight pants, do your best." I guess she told the parents in passing, and their radar went off, which was appropriate. But after explaining the story and breaking a sweat, Mom and Dad gave off a seer riot without cracking a smile at the confusion. I guess that's understandable, but all I was thinking was you am not trying to pull something with your 4th grade daughter. Maybe next time, don't buy your 9-year-old jeans that prevent her from sitting crisscross applesauce. Mother, edit word. Story 5. My literature teacher likes to tell a story about talking to a student's mom who she was friends with and was talking about how difficult it is dealing with students that don't want to learn. So the poor kid's mom says to him, "Jacob, stop being a edit yes." This was in Australia, but calling your child one still isn't usually appreciated. Although, having a teacher say it in class is quite funny. Story 6. I had a student's mom come in to defend her 15-year-old son's complete lack of work in my class. She felt the need to let me know that he was a really great kid, despite doing next to nothing in drawing class, but complaining and talking about everyone around him. It got weird when she recounted a story about overhearing him and his friend having a conversation about. According to her, the fact that her son was still a virgin was testament to his upstanding character. I failed to see the connection between not yet having had and not doing any drawing in drawing class. Edit. To respond to the questions, drawing class means art class specializing in drawing techniques. Technically, it was drawing second edit. Wow. Many of you must be naturally gifted artists, according to your assessment of a drawing course being a waste of time or a blow-off class. Students who blew off the class failed. Many of my students who took it seriously went on to higher education and careers in art. Story 7. Middle school teacher here. I got a few, but hey race, my most recent white student and black student got into a fight. It had nothing to do with race and everything to do with 8th grade boys being dumb. But when the white kid's dad comes to pick him up, he says, "Well, maybe you wouldn't have got in trouble if you hadn't sat him next to a colored boy." This was a few weeks ago, not a few decades. Story 8. It was my first year teaching in elementary school. Dad showed up with his son. This boy was a little shy in class, and he was very bright and responsible. He had started the year below grade level and had worked hard to get on track. The dad was smelling strongly of alcohol, weaving and slurring his words. I called the office to have someone come down. We escorted them to the office and had him wait. He ended up getting sick in the trash can. I remember the look of embarrassment, anger, and sadness on the son's face. I had other conferences scheduled, so I couldn't stay long, but the police had to be called by the administration. The next day, the son came in and said he was sorry. I told him I was proud of him and that I was sorry his dad was sick and that I hoped he felt better soon. That seemed to cheer him up a little. I sent home the progress report and great examples of his classwork. I did try to reschedule, but it never happened. The worst of it was around the holidays, this student would ask if he could come home with me, or had mentioned that he wished I was his mom. I told him that his family would miss him too much, and he said no, when it broke my heart. He moved schools the following year. Story 9, when I was in junior high, my grandfather had his favorite hooker take my little brother and I to a parent-teacher conference because he was too drunk to drive. I didn't tell anyone for the longest time. Story 10, generally, I get along very well with my students' parents. Even the parents of students who require a lot of redirection and heart-to-heart conversations about their behavior. Even the parents that other educators tell me don't care about their children. Over the years, I've found that the vast majority of parents care about their children, and as long as I do a good job of showing them that I also care about their child's success, we get along great. I try to approach our conversations as an ally in the effort to help their kid to do well in life. I finally had a meeting where I felt like the parent did not have the child's best interest in mind, and it broke my heart. It wasn't called the authorities abusive, but I quickly realized that anything I said would be used to manipulate my student at home. So I just ended the meeting as quickly as possible, making only very general comments. It was a downer. Story 11, we had a meeting with a mom of a student who was diagnosed with severe ADHD. Him talking couldn't sit in a chair for more than 3 seconds. We asked why he wasn't medicated since he struggled so severely, and it really hurt his own academics, as well as the victims of his distractions. She broke down crying, telling us that she had been gang raped, and then gone so crazy she has been institutionalized. She then shared with us that while in the state institution, they treated her like a guinea pig and tested her on every drug under the sun, resulting in her being in a zombie-like state. This student's dad is in jail for life, so they were under the care of CPS at the time. So, because of the zombie-like issue with how the institution medicated her, she says she will never medicate her son. He runs wild through the school, often hurting other children, and we can't do anything. The other most haunting conference. Mom couldn't come to school because she had recently had a stroke. We have this little boy who you can't help but love to death, even though he does the opposite of everything you ask, but you can tell he's seen a lot in his 12 years. Anyway, things were getting pretty bad as he had thrown a desk at another kid in my classroom. So, we had the aunt come to school for a parent conference. She shared with us that when our student was 6, he watched his uncle murder his daddy. She also shared that he says he can't wait to do his uncle like his uncle did his daddy. One day, I teach in an urban school and hold a lot of parent conferences so these stories could easily continue. Edit. Wow, my first goal. Thanks for all the feedback and comments. I got a large stack of grading to tackle and a few lesson plans to make. When I have finished that, I will come back and post more. I really try to get my students' parents involved in their education, which often leaves me with an abundance of stories. Edit 2. There was a little confusion. My bad about that. These are 2 different students and 2 different families. Story 12, guitar teacher here. I had been teaching this kid, 10 or 11 years old, for about 3 months, and this little wasn't doing anything outside of my studio. I had to reteach just how to hold the guitar at virtually every lesson. Every week would be the same speech. You have to practice every day, even just a little bit, blah, blah, blah. Never see the parents. They just wait out in the parking lot. One day, this kid's father comes in and marches straight at me, clearly angry, and gets right in my face, pointing and barking. I've been paying good money for these lessons, and my kid hasn't learned a thing. What exactly are you teaching him? Calmly and quietly, I said, well, for one thing, to practice every day. The father's face kind of dropped, and he looked at his kid, then back at me. He's supposed to practice every day. Yes, for at least half an hour. He looked back at the kid and then started to get huffy again. Well, what's he supposed to practice? I looked at the kid and said, get out your music and show your dad. The kid, realizing he was caught, just silently opened his bag and pulled out the large stack of music had been given, never once looking at me or his father. I thought the father was going to pop right then from embarrassment, either because he was too stupid to realize that you can't learn an instrument in half an hour per week, or that his kid lied to him and put him in this situation. They never returned, which was fine. They were wasting my time anyway. I've had similar run-ins with parents, almost always with the same reasons, but never that aggressive. Please remember, if you're putting your kids into music lessons, that they have to devote some time to it every day if you want them to get better. Edit, there are a number of people saying that maybe the kid wasn't interested in the guitar, which is obvious. The troubling thing that follows is the statement wait until he shows interest, wants to play, etc., or something like that. Hypothetical situation, your child comes up to you one day and says, want to play guitar. Maybe their best friend just started. Maybe they like Justin Bieber and want to be like him. Whatever, you tell them that if they're really good, or some other bribe that you'll get them a guitar for Christmas or their birthday or whatever. So they're really excited. They're talking about guitar and how they're going to play all the time and start a band, whatever. You buy them a guitar and pay for lessons, and after a few classes they stop. Practicing is now a fight, a chore, and they just won't do it. But the kid showed interest, didn't they? This is the case more often than not in my experience. The kid showed an interest and then lost interest. What do you do in this situation? Never encourage their interest again. Wait until they show a serious interest in something. How can they learn what it means to pursue their interests if they aren't made to work through the not-so-fun parts of anything? As I said in another comment, it's like saying, eat your broccoli, or I'm not going to cook it anymore. Story 13, my first year of teaching, I had a mother who pretty much ignored everything I was saying and assumed it was all bad. I open with, hey, your daughter has shown some excellent work in class this semester. She replies with, I doubt that. She can't do anything. When I try and assure her she had in fact done well with proof, she dismissed it and said she will never be as good as her siblings. I then offered some advice for how to improve her already decent grade, and the mother replies that it ill-ground her for a month. From that point on, everything I said, she literally added another month on to her daughter's grounding time. I ended up just summing up as quick as possible to try and save the daughter, spending the rest of her life grounded. Edit. Story 14, teacher here. This happened about 10 years ago. A parent once popped by to chat with me. I think it was during lunch or something because I was alone in my room. He was concerned that his son was failing. I was explaining what assignments the kid was missing, and Dad started getting very heated, not angry per se, but agitated and loud. The louder he got, the more physical his gestures. Since I hadn't been expecting him, I was loading some stuff into a closet in my room when he showed up, and pretty soon he had me boxed into the closet, speaking, sternly, not exactly yelling, shaking his finger in my face. I am not a small woman at 6 tall. But he was bigger than me, angry in my space, and preventing me from leaving. I was flustered enough that I couldn't really think clearly enough to take back control of the situation. I can't say that I specifically was fearing for my safety, but I was sort of in that deer-in-the-headlights mode, where I could see oncoming disaster but couldn't move out of the way. This was during school hours, and another student walked in, saw what was happening, turned around and booked it. At first, I thought he thought the situation looked inappropriate, and I was having some sort of assignation in my classroom during school goodbye career, but he actually went and got other staff, thank God, that interrupted the incident, and Dad stepped back. As soon as he took a step back, I think he realized what had been doing, and how his behavior was pretty scary. Like I said, I don't think he was mad at me specifically, just the situation, and all he wanted was the best for his special needs son. It was pretty clear that once he took a literal step back from the situation, he was pretty appalled at himself. I didn't hear from him again, and the kid transferred out unrelated to the incident a couple of months later. Story 15, well, since nobody else has anything, it'll add my story. I was a second grader, and I had 2 teachers. We had to write about what we wanted to be when we grew up. I had just learned that my upstairs neighbors, who were also my best friends, had an older sister who was a professional dancer. She made money just dancing for people, having fun like I do. I was in ballet jazz dance at the time, so of course I'm all over that. I drew my little picture of me dancing like a ballerina, said what I wanted, and went home. Next day, the bulletin's covered in our drawings, but I can't find mine. I go up to one teacher and ask why it's not there. She's just silent. I go to the other teacher and ask why. She just says that we'll talk about it later. This was disappointing because I also fancied myself an artist. Next day, my mom comes to school with me. Awesome. We go meet my teachers, and we're the first ones there. Then they pull out my awesome drawing of my aspiring career as a dancer, and they ask my mother, do you know anything about this? My mom looks horrified. I get really confused. She apologizes and basically runs out the door out of embarrassment. As it turns out, a ballerina is a respectable dancer. A break dancer is a respectable dancer. But for some reason, the dancing my best friend's sister does is not respectable. Had I known that wanting to be a stripper in second grade would have been such a big deal, I probably would have gone with vet. Edit, I'm a terrible, terrible writer. Specifically, when I'm on my phone in the wee hours of the night, I'm leaving the original comment, as is so the underneath comment still makes sense. But let me clarify a few things by just writing it without the attempt at flair. My upstairs neighbors are my best friends. Their older sister lived away. One day, they told me she was a stripper. I had no idea what a stripper was, so they explained that it was a person who danced on a stage, and people gave him her money that Husha put in their belt. They danced on a pole. So when time came to write about what we wanted to be, I drew me dancing on a pole with a ballerina skirt with money sticking out of it. I said I wanted to be a stripper and that I wanted to make bucks in my belt. Again, I had no clue about the taking off of clothing or gratification of others. I was in second grade. My parents had been divorced, and my elementary school had this whole banana splits thing they forced me to attend. and I was fine with my parents being split up, but everyone else was complaining about. So I had to complain about something, which was that my mother had to take extra hours at night, so I never got to see her anymore. Of course, once I drew that I wanted to be a stripper, and my teachers knew about my mom working late hours into the night in order to make more money, I think they just got worried that she was exposing me to that. Also, yes, I have seen that drawing of the girl holding the shovel that looks like a stripper. No, I didn't steal this from that. This really happened to me, though me saying that doesn't prove a thing, but nothing I do can oh well, when I did see that though, I showed it to my mother. She was thoroughly amused. She also loves to tell my friends how, when I was in second grade, my life's goal was to make bucks in my belt. Sorry for being a shitty writer. I get how confusing it all was. I failed, good thing got an art psych major. Story 16, I had to make a phone call home and tell a mother that her son called a girl a camel toe in class. Very uncomfortable conversation. Although I cuss like a sailor out of school. For some reason, I have a hard time telling parents that their middle school-aged child said something like that in class. Story 17, not a teacher. But in year 6, I had parent-teacher meeting with my music teacher. He asked if I had concerns, and I told him I had trouble with the saxophone. He queried further on, and I told him I just can't blow it right. I was having trouble with blowing into the reed. He was confused, so I'm on blowing into the saxophone. My hands were forming a cylindrical shapes on top of one another, as in I'm playing the buttons, except it doesn't look like I'm playing the saxophone. In hindsight, I realized it looks like I'm holding a giant, and I kept blowing on it. Worst part was I kept taking big breaths before blowing. I did this for a minute while everyone just sat there. I don't know why my parents didn't stop me. TLDR, I blew imaginary dicks. Story 18, former preschool teacher here. Parent-teacher meetings always stress me out, and more often than not, they took up the entire week. After a particularly challenging one midweek, I decided to blow off some steam and hit up a dance club I frequent on occasion. So I'm basically dressed like a wee bit drunk and grinding all over the sexy menfolk. One guy in particular caught my eye, and we ended up making out pretty heavily. We talk, I enjoy him, and I invite him back to my place. A really stand-up guy. He explains that he would love to, but wanted me to know that he's in an open marriage, and while his wife is cool with his having dates and girlfriends, he's not looking to replace her or get involved, etc. Suffice it to say that kind of killed it for me. But we still talked well into the evening and parted on good terms. You do see where this is going, right? Fast forward the next evening to parent-teacher conference for one of the newer girls in my class. ID met mom several times during drop-off, but when the guy whose tongue ID had down my throat not 24 hours before walked in, I nearly shat myself. What followed was the most awkward parent-teacher meeting ID ever had, including ones where I've had to talk with parents about why their kids can't tweak each other's penises a game they call penis tickle, which ultimately lead to a discovery of an abusive relative, a child who wouldn't use the bathroom, but would in his hand and hide it behind a fish tank. This happened several times, and the fact that it isn't abnormal for their child to fall asleep while still living out a bunny, the soft, plushy shed had since birth. Those were difficult, but coming face-to-face with a dad who knows I secretly like to be tied up and spanked haunted me for a long time. Story 19, more unforgettable than haunting. I was teaching a very low-ability group about Romeo and Juliet, and how I shall bite my thumb at them was an insulting thing to do. One of the children didn't understand what an insult was, and I'm not thinking, said it's when you say something mean about someone, for example. If I said your mom smelled, then that would be an insult. Unfortunately, the child really took this to heart, probably increased by being from an Asian respectful to women background, and left the room in anger. I caught up with him and apologized, and let him know it was only an example and not me trying to be mean, and he seemed to accept that. However, the next day his dad came in, demanding a meeting with me. He was furious that I had been insulting his wife in my lessons, and was out for blood. I made the same point that it was only an example, and I wasn't implying anything about his wife, and his response was, I don't care. How do you know my wife doesn't smell? At that point, it took every ounce of control. I had to keep a straight face, and the rest of the conversation is a vague memory. I eventually managed to pacify him, but I will never forget that meeting as long as I live. Story 20, I work at a preschool, and this dad, who is also a pastor, told the director that he didn't want his son exposed to Eastern religion because we sometimes had meditation with the children to wind them down when they got a bit too crazy. The meditation was just the children lying down, closing their eyes, and us sprinkling fairy dust on them and telling a story about fairyland. With music in the background, all parents loved it and thought it was cute from various backgrounds. Story 21, taught in an inner-city school and had 160 students. 3 parents showed up for parent-teacher night. 3. So many parents would screen and never return my phone calls when their kid didn't turn in work or would skip class. It's hard to teach kids if the parents aren't on your side. Story 22. I just provide childcare at a school after school hours, but I had to tell a mother that her Jr. kindergartner 4 to 5 years old had gotten so mad that Shed said, I'm going to go out and get a gun and shoot everyone. And then myself, this kid was mad because her older sister kindergartner, 1 year older, had been taunting her in really subtle and creative ways, like complimenting everyone else but not her. The little one had also copied the gun thing from her big sister, who has said that before because she likes to say violent things and laugh. The mom's face just fell when she realized I was talking about the little one. They're both unbelievably intelligent and articulate, but the little one hadn't had problems saying violent stuff like that before. Story 23, not parent-teacher, but parent-brownie leader girl guide Girl Scouts interaction. The leader was on the way into the hall for brownies that night and was approached by the father of one of her new kids. He grabs her, holds a knife to her throat, and starts screaming at her for not making her kid a sixer, which is the kid who's in charge of a small group of brownies. Normally, they only get that title after they've been at brownies for a few years, and they're older. She had only just started. He says that if she doesn't make his daughter a sixer that night, he'll come back and kill her next week. Needless to say, she walked into the hall, told all the kids to not come back next week, and that she was closing the unit down. People are crazy. Story 24. With 5 minutes left in the conference, my student's 2-year-old brother had been playing with trucks on the floor, walked up to his mom, and asked for milk. Suddenly, she was pulling her out, and I was going over closing comments while her son attached himself to her nipple. I'm all for breastfeeding in public, but a little notice would have been appreciated. TLDR, got an eyeful of my students' mothers. Story 25 isn't a teacher, but had a pretty weird teacher-parent meeting in 7th grade. First of all, handball is a big deal in Denmark, and this was during the Women's World Cup. I was the last student to talk to the teacher, and everybody was going home. We got in, sat down, and she just said, well, no problems here. I'm off to watch some handball. Then she left. My parents were fuming. I dodged a bullet. Edit nice username OP. Story 26. My father was an elementary teacher for 38 years and had one that topped them all. My father is white, and 1 year he had a student that was barely doing any work, incredibly disruptive in class, and happened to be black. This kid's older brothers were notorious at the school for similar behavior. When my dad had the student's father to come in to discuss his son, the father erupted. He immediately accused my dad of being racist and refused to look at any paperwork my dad had on him for a 3rd grade teacher. My dad handed out a ton of worksheets and was absolutely meticulous with tracking his students, so there was a substantial paper trail for a 3rd grade student. He began showing up after school to pick up his kid, something he had never done before, and yelling in the hallway that my dad was racist. Of course, the accusation of racism went through the district quickly, and the father got the California NAACP involved. After several months of bullshit, during which my dad kept teaching this kid, the district came to the conclusion that my dad was not racist. The kid just needed help. The NAACP agreed, and the president of the California chapter personally apologized to my dad for getting involved with the wild accusations of the father. They also discovered why the father refused to look at any paperwork about his son. He was illiterate and wanted to hide it, so acted belligerent so he wouldn't have to admit it to others. My father retired a few years later, mostly due to health reason, but I knew this took a lot out of him. The whole time through, I don't think he was mad at anyone, maybe the NAACP, for getting involved, and was mostly just sad that this kid and his brothers were clearly not going to get the help they needed. Story 27, called the parents because 8th grade student was bullying another student. Bullied student is confined to a wheelchair, and I observed the bully throwing gum at him during class. Father comes in, but only speaks Spanish. Cape Verde math teacher says he knows enough Spanish to translate. So we begin meeting with math teacher, myself, father bully, and bully, father something in Spanish math teacher. What he is saying is that he admires your passion, and bully interrupts. That's not what he's saying. He said you're a liar. That's when I noticed how pissed off dad looks. He angrily tells me something else before getting up, nearly flipping the table, and leaves. I asked the math teacher what he just said. He told me he didn't know. Story 28, I started to warn a parent that his son was hanging out with gang members and smoking pot. My assistant principal stopped me and pulled me into the hall, forbidding me to talk about gangs or suggesting son was taking drugs. Next year's student was beaten to death with 2 others by home invaders who heard that they had a drug stash. One of the dead was another student of mine. He was a nice kid. Story 29, as a student teacher, 2 parents were basically calling me dumb, even though during the meeting I barely spoke. My 2 co-teachers did. They had an autistic son and didn't realize my brother is autistic, so they were going off saying I had no experience. My co-teacher slapped them with some knowledge after that, and they completely shut up about me. Something I'll never forget, though. Story 30. My dad is a primary school teacher. During a teacher-parent meeting with my Year 10 advanced English teacher, the guy starts asking my dad how he teaches kids to write essays and then starts taking notes. My dad then understood why I was doing so bad in English. TLDR English teacher was a dropkick. Story 31. Every time. I'm not a teacher. Actually, I'm 17 and still in high school. But, like 2 years ago, my math teacher was a total in my parent-teacher conference, and she was totally lying, and it ruined my sophomore year Teachers of Reddit. Story 32. I'm a teacher, and I once had the parents of one of my more difficult students come in for a conference. The student hadn't been diagnosed with anything, but he's since been diagnosed with bipolar and autism. The mom was a guard at the county jail, and the dad was a professional clown. Both came into the conference wearing their uniforms. It was kind of weird. Story 33. Had a mother snap on me over an F that their kid received for a quarter grade, making him ineligible for basketball. This is very typical, but her subsequent meltdown was not. She started taking handfuls of paper and throwing them around the room, screaming, "I'm a worthless piece of," then stated my son has been talking about killing himself lately, and if he does, then blood is on your hands. Our principal finally escorted her from the room and had her talk with the school counselor. Interestingly enough, this kid's stepdad had been arrested for solicitation of a minor a month prior to this incident. But yeah, I'm the hero that's up this kid's life. Story 34. One of my teachers, let's call him Mr. Mac, would bag on me or clown on me in class, but when I would do the same, I would always get sent to the office or a write-up. This guy was just, it's a long story. So there was a teacher-parent conference in the gym, and all the teachers had tables set up, and parents would go around one by one talking to the teachers about their kids. My dad always wore a suit when he would go to my school, and he looked and talked like he was an OG mobster from back home, different country, just overall intimidating guy. When my dad got to Mr. Mac's table, my dad knew about how he would always with me, so he just started the conversation about my behavior in class. Basically, my dad just said, "You're not going to disrespect my child again. Do you understand me?" And Mr. Mac just stood up, ran across the gym screaming, "He threatened me. He threatened me. Call 911. He went and hid behind another teacher. Meanwhile, my bio teacher was cracking up because he was cool with my dad and he knew Mr. Mac was a drama queen. It was pretty hilarious. Story 35. I told this story once before on Reddit, so forgive me for those who have read it before. I'm a former teacher. I still work with youth, so I see an awful lot of parents, good and bad. When I was a teacher, a few years ago, the school was holding parent-teacher conferences. Mind you, this was middle school, so we held conferences with our advising groups and had a folder of work that we had compiled from other teachers. So I start going through this folder of work. This kid is a quiet kid who struggles with staying focused and daydreams a lot, but is otherwise not a bad kid or anything. We get to a science test where he missed like several points because of kind of dumb mistakes, and the dad took the time to go through each problem he missed and rework the problems with his son. So I am thinking, wow, here is a parent who is really invested in his son's education. You go, Dad, and then it happened. He flips to the next paper, which was some daily assignment from language arts. The assignment was done, and everything. He had gotten something like an 85 on it, but this paper had some remarkably intricate doodles on it. They were actually really beautiful. The dad sees this paper, and without a moment's hesitation, he backhanded his son. It was hard enough that the kid got a nose. Father proceeds to scream at him about how his stupid drawings were distracting him from learning, and how if he ever sees him drawing again, unless he's making straight, as there will be to pay, just flipping out and berating him hardcore. I try calming him down by saying that maybe enrolling him in the art class would give him an outlet for his talent, and it wouldn't distract him so much. And then the dad gets up in my face like we're almost nose to nose, and he starts screaming that I'm a stupid who doesn't know about raising children. You know, I just have a degree in child psychology and education, but what I know about kids and their needs, I was speechless. I was a first-year teacher, and I hadn't had anything like this happen before, so I grab the bleeding, crying kid's hand and take him to the office. Dad tries to meet back in a room. In the scariest teacher voice I could muster, I said that if he laid a hand on me or the kid again, he would leave this building in handcuffs. I brought the kid to the office, had the secretary call the police, and made my first ever report to DCFS because, you know, he had slapped his kid in front of a mandated reporter. Story 36. I'm about to have a meeting with a parent, principal, assistant principal, and me parent is screaming I'm a racist because her daughter earned a C in my class. Can't wait for this one. Perhaps relevant. I'm an Elie Wiesel Prize in Ethics Scholar Update post meeting. Well, the meeting went pretty well after all. Yes, the parents absolutely believed I was a racist. When they came close to saying it, I just put out there the truth of who I am, that I've left jobs in the past because of racists, that I have presented papers at conferences on civil rights, that I am a prize in ethics winner, and that I teach a plethora of various races and genders as a conscious efforts to equalize the content of my classroom. When I did this, I saw the mother and father physically relax a bit, and they acknowledged that they were glad I told them these things. Then we were able to, as much as possible, focus on the students' work. It seemed the parents were saying that they were certainly going to put pressure on their daughter to improve her work. I showed them that the subjective grading, where if I were a racist I could have the greatest impact, was all be work. Then I showed where the objective work, where I had little to do with grade, and the student simply showed what she did or didn't know, was at the low C range. Combined, she couldn't get out of the C range. For once in my career, my AP was very helpful in the meeting, keeping us on track, interjecting and redirecting when either side started to get flustered. I'm pretty happy with the results all the way around. I'll often get very flustered in these meetings and make them worse, but not this time. What concerns me is that their impressions about me, having never met me, came from a rumor in the community that I treat non-white students differently. Truth is, I teach gifted and talented students, and if students of any race aren't meeting expectations, I speak with them about it. However, if a group of parents get together in circles that are not very diverse, I can see how the impression is that I get on the case of X-race students more than others. In reality, I get on any student's case if that student isn't measuring up to snuff. Thanks for the thoughts, concern, and comments.